All right, g'day, Newcastleians. Welcome back to the Jetstream special episode today. We have back Executive Director and probably titled Interim CEO at the moment due to the departure of Shane. But Maurice Bisetto, thank you very much for coming back on the Jetstream podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks, Furns. Thanks for having me.
Speaking of the CEO, how does the search go?
We are very close. I can't really say too much at the moment, but we probably went through a pretty exhaustive list of candidates. We sort of narrowed it down to a short list of two, and we're in in-depth negotiation with one of those as we speak. So hopefully an announcement around the appointment of a new CEO is imminent, could be sort of days or 1 or 2 weeks away, hopefully.
Absolutely. Awesome. So obviously we're looking about 8 months since Maverick Sports Partners came into ownership of the Newcastle Jets. How do you think things are tracking, and what are you looking to maybe get out into the Novocastrian knowledge about how things are going, maybe behind the scenes, because obviously we all know how things are going on the park. But what about some of the things that have been going on in the background that maybe people aren't necessarily aware of?
Yeah, 8 months in, that's correct. Pretty well spot on to 8 months, maybe 8 months and a week. And I have to say things are going very well in terms of we came in with a clear sort of strategy that had a 3 to 5 year timeline to that, and we're sort of well advanced on that strategy, primarily off the field. Okay, so the elephant in the room, of course, on the field for both our professional men's and professional women's, we'd like to have more points. And that's probably the one area which, I think we're if we look at just positions on the table, we'd like to be better placed, right? But outside of that, off the field, we're going very well. We're sort of starting to be better resourced. So when we came in 8 months ago, the place was incredibly under-resourced, and understandably, it was from a financial point of view, it was on its last legs and needed some propping up. So the team that kept the club going for that sort of, in particular, the last sort of 12 to 18 months have done an incredible job just to keep the place ticking over, but incredibly under-resourced. We're a bit more fit for purpose. We're still under-resourced today. Again, and that's just a function of we just don't have the funds to really throw out getting, 10 new people across the organisation, 10 new players in the squad, and 10 more people in our football department across professional men's and women's and academy. So everything we've done has been sort of quite measured and quite systematic, and we are getting there. We're still not there yet, but we've made some great improvement.
So what, since you've come in, what have been the appointments that we've made to the staff? Who have we brought on, and what sort of positions are we looking to fill in the sort of next sort of short to medium term?
Yeah, so good question, and I might leave some people off here because off the top of my head, but sort of new people coming in, if we look at sort of non-football at the moment, so Jason Hoffman's come in and he's working in our commercial department, as well as he has a role in player welfare. So, and that's across 50 professional footballers, men and women. So Jason's come on board. Then we've had Ben Hawes has come on board, and he heads up our commercial, marketing and media departments. We've also had Eliza has come on board, who did some internship, and we've moved her into casual employment in our membership department, working with Matt Starr and Troy Bibb. We've extended, so we had a lot of part-time staff, 3 days a week. So we've moved them to 5 days a week, and that's includes Christy Kingett, who runs is our administration manager for the academy. We brought on an events person, Harrison Cole, who's since left. So we need to replace that role, and that role is really running the events, and that's game day, men's, women's, and then all of our corporate events, our family day, membership day. We've got our members event on Thursday, the 6th of Feb. So we talk a lot about football, but really when you look at the Jets from a sort of higher level, we're pretty much an events business. We put on 26 games of football, 13 professional men's and, 11 to 13 professional women's, depending on whether you host finals or not, and Australia Cup games. So there are 26 events. We have season launches, we have corporate events, we have, we're having in 2 weeks our academy launch and jumper presentation, which will also happen at McDonald Jones prior to the doubleheader Saturday week. So we are an events company, and we our product is football related as well. So Ken Shembry's come on board as GM football, so that's in the football department. Clayton Zane's come on board in our academy space, working with the 13 to 16 boys. We're still trying to, I'm going to say right size, but certainly beef up our academy coaching spaces, which again have been running pretty much off the smell of an oily rag. So there's been a number of appointments. Gareth Varjik's come on board. He works in our membership affiliate program. He's also GM of strategy and special projects. Gareth's well known to a lot of people in Newcastle. Obviously, he's involved at Bar TV from a commentary point of view, and also I think he has a podcast in between two polls, which he does with Gary Wilson. It's not a bad show, and Chris Turner, CT. So yeah, he's come on board. So we're probably 6 or 7 people. I've essentially I'm an extra resource. I'm pretty well full time at the moment, helping across all aspects of the organisation. So we have gone some way in terms of getting the organisation, like I said, from a resource point of view, fit for purpose. I know a lot of your listeners will want to know about football. And again, it's similar with football. You would have seen we've made 2 new signings in the window from a playing perspective. That's probably the hardest lever to pull in terms of right sizing the organisation as a whole. Most of our professional footballers have 1, 2, 3 year contracts. Very difficult to make significant changes quickly from a player perspective. And I'm not suggesting that we want to. We probably need to some extent in terms of bringing in some aspects that are going to help the group. It's just not that easy to do unless you're really prepared to, buy out or pay out player contracts if players don't want to come to mutual positions around that. And getting new players in is really hard because most of the players you want are all currently contracted as well. So,
and most of your contracts that you're dealing with are ones that were signed before you even came on board. So
that's right. Pretty well, and we can get into the playing side of things, but pretty well most of the players, and that's players in and that players that left. And off the top of my head, we can talk about Reno Piscopo, Archie Goodwin and Lucas Moragas. Those sort of deals were done before we stepped in. They were out.
One thing that you did when Maverick came on board was highlight the need to bring in extra revenue through corporate and sponsorship opportunities. How's that tracking to how you were looking to get things up and running? Jets
that's actually really, that's one of the areas that we're really well advanced in and have probably performed above our expectations and what we implemented in the strategy. we've got a good team. You know, one of the things that I was really pleasantly surprised with is, you know, despite the fact that we are under resourced, that the resources that we have are actually very, very, very good, very qualified and hardworking and diligent, and have a lot of expertise in the space. They were a really good team. They just need a bit more support and still need more support. So bringing Jason and Ben on board in particular to help guys like Zane, who was here when we came in, has really helped sort of expand out our commercial presence and our relationship with our partners. So we managed to keep most of our partners on board, but we've implemented the Jets in Business program, where we have now 61 members in the Jets in Business over 8 months. To give you some sort of point of reference, Victory probably have the biggest business network in the country across professional sport. They have 110 members in Victory in Business, and they've been building that for 15 years. So, you know, the team getting to 61 in 8 months is a tremendous effort. We also have a formal player sponsor program, which we sort of had in dispatches in the past, but I think it's a bit more formalised now, where every player, professional men and women, now have a formal player sponsor, and most of the people that go to the games will see that when they announce the squads for both men and women, their sort of sponsors also get read out, you know, with sort of as they read out the squads for the day, and those sorts of things. So that's been really two very positive programs. More broadly, from a commercial point of view, we've brought on a number of new sponsors, as well as sort of maintaining the ones that were here previously, and that's including InfraBuild, which has come on board to sponsor our academy. They're our major sponsor for our academy program. So it'll be the Newcastle Jets InfraBuild Academy. Brian's Lawyers come on board as well. Cenex Tools, PMP are on the sleeve of the men's and women's. You know, we've made some really good strides there. And the important thing is, when Maverick Sports Partners came in, the Jets were losing and had lost probably the previous 5 years at least $4 million a year of trading losses, which is why the club in 20 years, you know, has had 5 different owners and gone broke 4 times previously. So change really needed to be made, and that's before those losses are made off the back of, you know, a $2 million plus APL grant distribution. So when you factor in that moving for this financial year from $2 million last year to, you know, $530,000 this year, you know, that sort of exacerbates your starting point from a loss. So if you're trying to turn around, say, a $4.5 million loss, there's another $1.5 million that you need to factor into that equation. So, like for like, you know, there's quite a big turnaround that we need to fill. Otherwise, the Jets, the Newcastle Jets, are not a sustainable football club, right? Yeah. And that's our primary aim, is to get the Jets sustainable. And yeah, you know, we're not going to die wondering on that. And I think with the journey to sustainability will also come the journey to success, on-field success is in particular. It's very hard to have on-field success if you're just losing money hand over fist. It's really hard.
Yeah, and really difficult to have these sorts of let people know what's going on behind the scenes, especially if things on the park aren't going as well, because obviously we've seen with things on social media and everything else, the support base can get frustrated when they don't see that there's progress, but there is progress being made, but it's probably more building the base up to be able to be sustainable, getting further on, and then be able to improve things on the park.
Yeah, and have that foundation for success. So if you need to invest, let's say a marquee, let's say Mario Balotelli, wanted to come to Newcastle. Well, if like I said, if you're financially in a situation where you're losing a lot of money, it's the question of losing more money rather than being able to make that investment in whatever marquee player that we'd bring to Newcastle, advantage to the organisation that could really bring everything down. Now, have we lost connection? Are we okay?
Yeah, no, we're all right. Yeah, you broke up for me a little bit, so yeah, not sure what's going on there. Hopefully that's still all good, but I can still hear you. It just sort of seized up for a second there, and then you kept going. So
yeah,
I'm sort of more concerned that my Jets shirt seems to be disappearing and reappearing every 5 seconds because of the green screen effect.
yeah, you're
So
losing an arm every 5 minutes, mate.
yeah, have we found that local business has been a little more cautious about coming forward with support? Because obviously there's been, as you mentioned earlier, there's been multiple ownership groups and changeovers. We've been able to reinvigorate over a number of times. Getting local business has been burned a number of times, for want of a better expression. How hard has it been to get some of the local businesses involved this time around to sort of not, because obviously some of these businesses you're talking about are a little bit further afield than the local area. So is that been an issue?
That's a good question. It's the dynamic in the Novocastrian business network. It's a real interesting one. So, on one hand, let's be clear, right? The Jets have had and have some partners that have basically kept the doors open, right? So, let's be clear. Without the Port of Newcastle, without Inspiration Paints, without Greater Bank, without AMP Control, without the University of Newcastle,
Council.
I'm going to throw Cardiff Motor Group in there as well. There have been some really loyal supporters and partners that have kept the doors open to the Jets. Without them, the Jets would have shut down a long time ago, right? So a lot of kudos has to go to those organisations in particular. And don't get me wrong, when you've got no resources, they've been underserviced over the 4 years in terms of what they've committed to in terms of a partnership. Jets will give you X, and in return you're going to give us Y. That Y, it probably has been sort of under-delivered by the Jets, and for just because they're under-resourced. And so we're hoping that those that have stuck with the Jets for the journey are starting to sense the difference. And that's the difference of just being better resourced and better equipped to service all of our partners and corporate network that little bit better than the past. On the other hand, business have really, in terms of local business, have really jumped on board and have a lot of the times reached out directly saying, we want to help. To have 61 businesses in our Jets in Business network, now probably 25 of those were pre-existing partners and sponsors, and I've just mentioned some of them, but there are more. But 30 to 35 would be new businesses that have just come on board the Jets to help. And the response has been tremendous. It really has. And so we're well on the way to building a really, like I said, solid sort of financial base, primarily through our corporate partnerships and sponsorships, as well as our sort of memberships. They're your two real key sources of revenue that clubs, and it's interesting, Melbourne Victory's accounts became public last week, and it's well publicised they lost $10 million off the back of $17 million in revenue, right? Now, that's a big revenue base. The Jets is $7 million, right? Just to put it into perspective. Okay, so that'll tell you what our expense base is, which is very difficult to downsize because, as I've said a number of times, we've been under-resourced, and still today, I would say, are under-resourced. We're just really careful on building up and locking in extra spend and extra expense in our sort of cost base without fully being confident that we can get that extra revenue that we need to build that base and get us at least to a sort of break-even position, which I think will be the platform for the Jets to really launch into supersizing on-field success, hopefully.
So talking about the on-field side of things, or maybe more footballing department as opposed to the admin, which we've been spending a good deal of time on. So Ken Shembry came in, I think, was sort of initially publicised more as a academy to sort of head the academy and development side of things. Has that sort of changed to you sort of more general football now? Football operations seems to be more the remit now.
No, Ken actually came in to support senior men's program primarily, and just to keep a sort of a supportive eye and a supportive watch over the academy. Again, we're really happy where the academy is at, albeit we are very conscious that we could resource the academy a little bit better, and we will, right? But Ryan Campbell, who sort of heads up, he's our technical director of our girls academy, and Damien Zane, who heads up the boys, and they also coach the senior girls in those academy programs, have done a fantastic job, right? So, Will Dobson is just testament to the fact that, a 17-year-old kid who's come through our academy, got a debut for our senior men's side, is testament to that academy program. And there's good talent in there. Well talked about, Nunez, Van Dawson, Bracco, who's come on for a couple of games. They're doing a great job. And on the girls' side, even better, like the other day, I think there was something like 11 of our academy products in the match day squad of 16 for the girls the other day. And I don't know if you managed to see the girls' game after the boys on Saturday, but some great young talent coming on. Josie Allen and Claire Adams, who are products of the academy and junior programs here in Newcastle, came on and really lit the place up in the second half. Just fantastic to watch, and a real testament to our academy. So Ken was brought on to keep a bit of a watching brief and support Damien and Ryan in undertaking those responsibilities, and we've beefed up, as I mentioned before, Clayton today to come on board. So he reports into Damien, looking after the 13s to 16s in the boys. So he's like a junior academy TD reporting up to Damien, and we're looking to do the same in the girls' space. And we will slowly, give that academy program the resource and expertise that it deserves. Zorro's come on board as an assistant coach to help Damien. Zoricic, who, New Zealand international, well known to Newcastle, and coaches Cooks Hill in the NPL, the men's team. So there's been some good appointments. So Ken came on board. It was originally a 3-day-a-week role. That appointment was in place about the time that we stepped in, and so Ken is now overlooking the men and women's program as well as the academy. So we've expanded out the role of GM of football to be all of football, and primarily in a sort of support and administrative perspective. Ultimately our academy coaches reporting to our professional men's coaches from a technical point of view. So Damien reports into Rob Stanton and his football department from a technical. So the philosophy, the formations, the systems, the style of play, and the values are all consistent. So someone like a Will Dobson at 17 can step in to a senior team and play in a position and in a system that he's very familiar with, because he's done that in the academy space. So that technical part of it all comes through Ryan Campbell for the girls and Rob Stanton for the boys.
Righto. So from the recruitment side of things, how involved is Ken in that side, and how does it sort of all how is it sort of all working, and how do you envisage that'll change over the next sort of couple of seasons? Because obviously we've had some hits and misses with certain players. I'm not going to mention names, but we've had hits and misses over our history, with especially with regards to imports. We've had more success, less successes than failures.
Yeah.
And we've brought in two new recruits in the January window. How do we see the difference in recruiting those Kota and Charles as opposed to recruiting people for the beginning of the season?
Yeah, look, I don't think. Let me start by saying I think all clubs are in similar boats, give and take. I mean, recruiting imports is a really tough gig, certainly for A-League clubs, right? Because we're competing in a global market, unlike a lot of our other sports locally in Australia, and specifically, let's say the AFL, for example. But we're in a global market, so when we look at signing a player like Kota Mizunuma, we're competing globally with other clubs around the world, and salaries are sort of global salaries, which makes our ability and our purchasing power in Australia vis-a-vis other countries in the world, it's slightly diminished. So it really is tough. You're trying to find either diamonds in the rough, or in Kota's instance, players that are heading towards the end of their career and looking for something more than just football, and it can be lifestyle, it can be the desire for him and his family to learn English and experience, living outside of, their domestic country. So it really is tough, and a lot of clubs, it's hit and miss for a lot of clubs. It's not easy. So we are trying to improve that process primarily, and I won't get into a lot of it now, but we're trying to get into it through technology and sports tech, right? So our scouting system and our scouting resource is thin. We are reliant on our contacts around the world, in terms of agents and networks, to try and identify players, A, that are willing to come to Australia, and B, willing to do so within salary restrictions that A-League clubs have. And so that's really hard, and there's a lot of information in databases, but trailing through that and making sure you run the eye test over everyone can be very difficult. Ultimately, every player we sign or don't sign, that final decision is made by Rob and his football department. We whether it's Ken or I or anyone in the organisation want to sign a player, and needs it's Rob's stamp of approval, because obviously the wins and losses and the performances are on Rob ultimately. So we don't want to be in a situation where the club has forced a player onto Rob, or vice versa. We try and support Rob in every decision, including recruitment, and that's playing and football department recruitment. That's ultimately Rob's call, and all we can do as an organisation is to provide as much resource and support for those decisions to be made, hopefully more better than not.
So sort of doing more of the legwork before taking the option to Rob, rather than this is a name we have, what do you think? It's more of this is who's been offered to us, we've seen this, he was going to suit your style of play, or he's got these attributes. It's going to be a little bit more of the legwork being done for him.
Correct. I mean, when you think about the amount of time it takes to scout one player, right? So someone comes along and says, player X, he could be off contract, could be available, might be interested, might cost you this. Let me know if you can. So to get to the end in terms of yay or nay, it probably, it's anywhere between 2 and 5 hours of research, if you include analysing the data, where they've been, how many games they've played, how many minutes, have they been injured in the past, what's their body like, age profile, leagues they've played in, and then ultimately the eye test and having a look at vision. And that's proper game vision, 90-minute vision, not sort of highlight reels. That takes time, and I think part of having more resource is helping the football departments distill that information. So, if that happened once, it happens 20 times. So for Rob to sit down and with his team and go through 20 of those, I mean, his focus is on pitch and the next game and talking to players and managing that process. And I'm not suggesting it's a distraction, but it just takes a lot of time. That if we can then have resources and technology and data in place to distill, 20 opportunities down into here's a top five, here's a second top five, here's a third, and that's based on the data and the resources you have on hand to enable you to sift through that. That will take Rob and the football department's time, reduce it by 75%.
So we brought in two players in this transfer window currently, so Kota and Charles. How obviously it's only a really short assessment, but how impressed or how much of an impact do you think they're going to have on the rest of our season?
Yeah, look, I think they're going to have. I actually think they're going to have a big impact, and it may not just be a big impact from their specific output, but it's more their impact on the team's output and where they fit in terms of the team's processes. I mean, we got little glimpses on Saturday, and you'd have to walk away from those performances from those two in particular and say, well, they look like they're going to be pretty good signings for the club, right? I think early doors. And again, as I said, like Rob said in his press conference on the weekend, it's the strongest bench he's had probably almost since he's been at the club, right? When you've got Kota, Charles, Lockie Rose, and Willisole as options on the bench. It's a pretty decent bench to have. And I'm not one. I don't believe in luck, Furns, right? But I think, and I think luck follows the better teams, and so that says something that they're just better, right? So they tend to get what's seen to be more of a luck. And we've been pretty unlucky this year, even on the weekend, in terms of posts. But if you go through penalties and VAR decisions, we've really been at the sort of arse end of some of those decisions, and when you look at the squad and the squad that's on the field, everyone constantly says they're a young team, and they are. But we do have some experience. It just, when you look at Sushna, Ingham, Lockie Rose, they're probably our three most experienced players outside of Ryan Scott. And they're the three that have had the long-term injuries this season. It's just the wrong three to be injured for that group of players. If we have any other of the players that are injured, we've got other players on almost a like-for-like basis that can just step in and do the job. But you can't replace experience, games played, and I'm certain that if you look at the players we had on the bench, the team, the performance that we put on the park, and then you add Shushna, Dane Ingham, Kankar to that mix, who were players that were unavailable for that game. All of a sudden you're saying, well, hey, it's going to be. Try and pick that starting 11, right? With those four on the bench and those three unavailable, there's already 7 that you've got to try and fit in an 11 that actually performed, pretty well, despite the fact we didn't get the win. So I think, with the 2 additions, they've been quite strategic in terms of, we weren't going to sign a young player that had only played 10 A-League games, that I can tell you. And there could be one or two more to come. But again, we're just going through the process of making sure that it's right for what we need. And then that'll take us to, there's 12 or 13 games left for the season. And then we start already thinking about next year, and working with Rob to make sure that, we really have a squad that we think can perform even better next year and really push for finals, and that'll be our thing.
So I'm pretty sure it's been publicised. I think it was in a Jimmy Gardner article that Rob said he's still looking to shore up the defence, which would suggest we're looking at a central defensive option. It's been mentioned around the traps about Lockie Jackson, currently available from the K League, and there was, I think, someone has posted on social media in the last sort of 48 hours that's the deal couldn't be agreed. Did you want to confirm or deny, or let that one lie, or are we looking for a central defense?
I think it's okay. Yeah, sorry.
You're right. And is Lockie Jackson no longer an option?
Yeah. Obviously, we just talked about Shush and Dane.
Yep.
Having those long-term injuries, and there's still a few weeks, and it's not just that. With 12 weeks to go, if you're back in training in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time, you've missed a couple of months of football. There's always that, that getting back to that match fitness, and we've seen with Lockie Rose in particular, he missed an extended period. We put him straight in the starting lineup. I think it was against, might have been against. I can't remember. It might have been the Adelaide game, and then he immediately got injured again, so missed another couple of weeks. So the football department's been a lot more cautious with, and that'll be the same with Shush and Dane. So sort of increasing our defence, and then with Phil injured at the moment as well, increasing our defensive stocks, would make sense. I think it's okay for me to say, yeah, we've spoken to Lockie Jackson, absolutely. And I think those conversations are still happening, and with a number of others as well. And so we've got till, I think the February's open till sort of the first week of Feb. So we've still got a little bit of time to see, but it's got to be, like I said, it's got to be the right fit, the right person, the right terms, the right length of period, the right details. So that but yeah, we've spoken to Lockie.
Right. And I suppose we are a bit thin with regards to experience in the centre backs. So it's, I suppose, a good idea that Rob's looking to target some more experience in that area rather than just throwing either a Nathan Grimaldi or a Ben Van Dawson into the blowtorch, as it were, to not get, throwing them into the lion's den, as it were. And well, it's being supportive of young players, and rather than just chuck him in the deep end.
Yeah, well, sort of Will Dobson, he earned his spot on the weekend, but you could argue he was sort of chucked a bit in the deep end, right? With the calibre of players that were on the bench behind him, but and Rob's not scared of playing a young kid with less experience if they've shown that they warrant that opportunity. And, I think probably we go back a year ago at the start of last season, guys like Clayton Taylor, it was probably a Will Dobson equivalent a year ago. And, he's turned into a pretty decent weapon and slightly separate profile, but stammer, he no one would have ever thought that he would have had the season that he had. So, we've got to give that sort of football department some kudos on a lot of the things they've done. And, there's and this is me talking, not so much Rob and the football department, but I would have thought going into this year that the centre-back position was an area that we were pretty comfortable in with, Mark Natta, Shushna, Nathan Grimaldi, and I'm missing one here somewhere. Well, we've got Dane in player back three.
Phil Canchar and Ben Van Dawson.
Oh, Phil Canco, of course. So it was one area that sort of never popped in my head as somewhere we may need to bolster, but injuries have sort of derailed that a tiny bit, and so the for the right person, of course, we would bolster those stocks. And I think it gives Rob also, he likes to have the flexibility of having four at the back or playing with a back three and three central defenders. So you sort of need 4 or 5 good ones if you're gonna play with a back three. And that's where I think guys like Dane Ingham can sort of evolve into that sort of role. It happens quite a lot. Just getting fullbacks to tuck in a little bit and be part of a central back three. But yeah, we're speaking to as many sort of players that we think will fit and suit and bolster the Jets squad across the board.
So, with injuries being a little bit of a bugbear this season, is the medical department somewhere we think we're possibly needing more resources, or have we just been unlucky with the types of injuries?
Yeah, I don't think there've been a lot of soft tissue. And we don't want to get into detail, but Dane Ingham fell and tore a pec. Right, it's not as if people are doing hamstrings, and even on the weekend, you could see Perth players, especially the last 20 minutes, they were going down with cramp left, right, and centre. We didn't have one player go down with cramp, right? So I think from an S&C strength and conditioning and high performance point of view, we're doing a really good job. We've got I'll give Alka Power a bit of a plug here. Where our hydration partner is Alka Power, and I think that had a lot to do with our guys not cramping compared to sort of the Perth guys, and yeah, it's a bit hard. We don't have a lot of soft tissue. There's sort of primarily impact and that type of we don't have 5 players out with bad hammies or calf strains. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I was probably more not necessarily from how they receive the injuries, but more the management of them coming back to make sure we don't have Lockie Rose type situation.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. With the benefit of hindsight, I think the coaching department would say that maybe he shouldn't have started that game and maybe had 1 or 2 games off the bench and build that. But I'm pretty sure they would have assessed all the data and done all of the testing to sort of say, yeah, he's good to go. And if you're good for 30, it's a bit hard to sort of he's good for 60. You know what I mean? Like that transition, 30, 45, 60. It's a bit there's a bit of a fine line, and I think they're obviously take a bit easier on it.
And the player himself was probably talking the coach's ear off because
my God, he would have been doing their heads in about you've got to start me. It's probably happening at the moment too. So.
All right, so we'll get to a couple of questions that a few people have thrown at us. First one comes from Declan Hitchcock from Facebook. So back at the start of the 1920 season, the club had a members-only forum where the club played out the direction of the club, goals for the season, how the academy is progressing, etc. Laurie at the time ran the evening and was alongside members of the board, men's and women's head coaches, and 2 players from each team. After Laurie had his say, the mic was open to the floor for members to ask questions or from anyone who was present. Would you be looking at doing this at some point down the track? And it would be another way, I suppose, for people to be able to have a bit more access to the people behind the scenes, as well as not just throwing things out on social media that we'll get to shortly, but it's another way of engagement and another way to maybe be able to get some more information out there as to what the club's doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Who raised that one?
Declan.
Okay. And we did talk about, a City Hall style meeting when Maverick Sports Partners first came on board. We did the same thing when I was at Western. Obviously, we were trying to build a community, so we ran a number of fan forums throughout, in particular Wyndham. We ran one in Ballarat, Geelong, where sort of potential supporters, fans and members could come as we sort of were building the club. And we talked about doing that for the Jets. There's a couple of things. I think it's a great idea and I would love to do it. It may have to be a digital version, if that's at all possible. We have 9,000 members, right? So I'm not sure. Maybe a great idea would be to grab one of the stands at McDonald Jones and set a bit of a forum up on pitch and have all of the fans, sit 9,000 in one big stand if they wanted to turn up. But I think venue would be one difficulty, but I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, you probably we do have 9,000 members, but I'm pretty sure the last time we did it might have been at I think the last time we had one was possibly at Hoyt's at Katara, where they hired out one of the theatres, and people just showed up. But there's the opportunity to people would be able to purchase a free ticket through Eventbrite or something you would be able to set a limit on how many people could come if venue attendance was a concern. I think you'll find that you probably would only really need to cater for maximum 150 people anyway, because people are more inclined to stay at home and contribute via social media rather than get out and come along to these sort of things. But yeah, probably from now onwards, now that you've sort of got the Mavericks got their feet under the desk and been able to do some things, as opposed to right at the very beginning where you're sort of really not got a great deal of information to be able to give out to people. From now, like maybe looking towards the end of the season as sort of here we've been in charge for 12 months. This is what we've accomplished. This is what the
look, I think it's a great idea, absolutely, and you're spot on. The last time I was on your podcast, I don't think we'd even had any chance to have a look under the bonnet, right? So we sort of bought the car, but and now 8 months in, we've had a really good look under the bonnet, and I have to say, what we've seen has been pretty good. I definitely will take on board and bring back to the team the possibility of let's call it a sort of member forum. And maybe we could wrap it into, because we do have a sort of member day each year where the players come out, and we could sort of wrap it into that day as well, and maybe combine not just player signings, but maybe an hour, I don't know, an hour with the boss and whoever the CEO will be at the time, and get maybe some of the board members and have for those that want, move them over to one part of the sort of site and get them to ask questions and connect that way. Could be maybe combining that. But yeah, great idea, and absolutely, I think it warrants consideration. Would love to do it, to be honest.
Since I put it up, did you want to quickly touch on what's going to happen at the Members' Day, and sort of give a quick couple of minutes about why people should be coming along to this?
Yeah, well, it's happening at the stadium, so they'll get a bit of a look around the inner sanctum of the changing room and getting to walk on the field, and I think it'll be a nice experience. I mean, it's not quite like the Anfield Stadium tour, right? But it'll give those members that attend a bit of a sense of the warm, if they haven't seen it before, the like I said, in underneath the stadium and the warm up areas and the changing rooms, and how it's all decked out, and walking through the tunnel and going on the field, and just getting a sense of looking back into the crowd and the grandstand, what it sort of feels like and looks like for the players. I think it'll be, I think it's going to be a good event.
Excellent. Now, there a bit of a snide comment that was posted. Chris Ackland asked to ask when we're getting a new coach. But,
this is Chris Ackland from the Sign Shop.
This will have been answered by the time this podcast comes out.
Well, hopefully. Look, we've been working with Rob for a number of months and really keen. We believe him and his team are the right people to take our Jets men's team forward. If it's up to me, Rob won't be going anywhere in a hurry, and reconfirming, hopefully extending his contract for another 2 years.
Excellent. And so things, your the board is happy with the direction that Rob is taking the club.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Excellent. Now I'm just trying to bring up some of these
Yeah.
other.
Having said that, and Rob would be the first to admit, of course, we'd like to have more points on the table, and some better performances. But if you really unpeel our performances, they've sort of they belie the sort of points that we have currently on the table. Now, on the first one, the table doesn't lie. You are where you are, and so we'll just have to work through that. But myself and the board are all very, very confident in Rob and the team.
Question came in via messenger from Simon Kelly. The intention is to develop players and sell to other clubs. I'm assuming that's an overall assessment of what most of the A-League clubs are doing. Will we, as a club, be insisting on sell-on clauses? For example, we sell to one team and 2 years later they sell the player onto another club. Do we lock in a percentage figure? Plenty of clubs around the world do this. What are we doing with sell-on clauses?
Yeah, so that look, good question. I'm going to start. Unfortunately, Furns, I tend to ramble on with some of my answers, but our intention is not necessarily to do that, right? Our intention is to win games of football and sign players and play players and prepare players to do that to the best of their ability, right?
Yep.
If as a part of that intention, a young player gets an opportunity, and this is where I sort of get a bit agitation's not the right. Like I hear people even at the APL refer to our league as a development league, and I don't think that's the right terminology. I think the reality is our league is used for development in some areas, so it's not a destination league for everyone, and it shouldn't be. Will Dobson should not think that the A-League's his destination. He would be looking abroad and working as hard as he can over the next season, 2-3 seasons, to get himself in a position to then continue his career at the highest level, and that's sort of outside of the A-League, obviously. So, but for some players, they would be looking at the A-League as somewhere where they, will probably stay and play the next 5 or 10 seasons and have really fantastic and successful careers in the A-League and help the Jets, win championships, right? So it's a bit of a mix. So that's not our intention. It could be a byproduct of having a really good academy and having a good scouting network and identifying the best young talent, and then having the best coaching and coaching processes around that to develop the best young talent into potential players that can be sold. And Stammer's one example of that. And sell-on clauses, absolutely. They're sort of very common practice in a young player's life cycle. So that would be more the norm than the exception, that if someone like Stammer was sold to Motherwell, that in that contract, that if Motherwell was to sign him to a bigger club in Europe, that contractually the Jets would be entitled to a percentage of any further sell-on fee.
Yep.
So that would be quite standard, but again, depending on the profile and in particular age profile of the individual, it makes more sense for some than for others.
Yeah, and again, with regards to Stammer, that was all done before you guys took over. So, but yeah, moving forward, that would be negotiation with players.
Well, it wasn't finalised. It was certainly in train during our period, and they're tough ones. So here's the reality. So you're confronted with Stammer and Serena Bolden, for example, right?
Yep.
The reality is, and let's talk about Stammer, he wanted to go overseas. He felt the opportunity for him to go overseas. So if we peel it back, right, so Motherwell, their season started in August, right? Our season, our first game, I think was the if I recall, either the 13th or 18th of October. I can't remember. Maybe it was the 18th of October, 17th, against Melbourne City. I can't remember the exact date. If Stammer had decided to stay, or we didn't release him and we made Stammer stay, which I don't think is the right thing to do, because you'll have a disgruntled player in your squad and they're never going to really perform unless they're fully sort of invested. And so we wanted to support Stammer in the pursuit of, having a better, continuing to progress his career. So going to Motherwell meant he played in August and he represented the Socceroos in October, right? I think the Socceroos had a game sort of the first week of October before the A-League had ever started. Now, if he stayed with us, that was never going to happen, right? He would have had maybe an Australia Cup game under his belt and a couple of trial games, but he wouldn't have been in a situation where he could have been picked for a squad, for example. So there's so many factors involved in looking specifically at a player's, what's best for the player and their career versus, what's best for the club and the squad.
All right. So Bridie Nesbitt posted more of a comment than a question, but interesting to hear your thoughts on it. I'm really curious as to the direction of the club at the moment and their game plan, as it seems to change week to week. I'd love to see more passion from the players and club officials for a team who a lot of people have supported from the beginning and continue to support through every up and down. At this point, I don't care where we sit on the ladder or if we win games. I just want to see the players show some energy and progress from game to game. I don't think the fans that have been showing up have gotten the dedication to the game that we deserve. I miss the days where they gave their all on the field and want to know when that will come back.
It's a good question. I'm not sure I agree with the observation that underpins the question. I would have thought even on Saturday we didn't quite get the result, but I think the energy and passion was there. Probably some of the other games, I think the two games where I would say that sort of from a physical battling sort of energy perspective that we sort of were below par would have been Wanderers at Wanderers and the Bulls game at home. Were probably the two games where, and I think the Bulls game in particular. Sorry? Oh, Western, I was there that day. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that was tough. They're tough there. The wind was blowing. But yes. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't want to make excuses for the guys. We've had a ridiculous fixturing. So again, I'm not a strength and conditioning guy, right? So I'm no expert in sort of high performance. But, when you play a game and then have a bye, then play a game and have a bye. And so we virtually played, I don't know, we might have played 4 games or 5 games in the first 8 weeks. And then all of a sudden we were asked to play 4 games in 14 days or 3 games in 10 days. That does, you're sort of not physically prepared for that. It's not like, you're in the English, you're in Europe or in England and you're just playing games all the time midweek and you're just conditioned for that, especially with a young, inexperienced side. If you've got some real experienced players, they're used to it and they can work their way through it. I think our young guys, a couple of times they have been flat and it looks like they haven't had the fight that, Newcastle expect and they do expect it. It's the nature of Novocastrians. You hear, I speak a lot with the sort of, the guys from the Knights and the old boys. I've been to a couple of their functions and, Crowie will say all the time, the fans, they didn't care whether you won or lost. They just wanted to see you fight, and work. And that's a philosophy. And it's certainly well known, both the men and women playing group. Probably a bit more difficult for us in the A-League versus NRL because you do, like one of the games we played, I reckon it was 34 and it was just stifling. It could have been the Adelaide. Like I couldn't walk, let alone think about those guys trying to run. And I know it's the same for everyone, but it might seem like they're sort of in slow motion or conserving energy, but I think, and it'll come. I think it'll come.
And confidence can be a fairly nebulous thing, especially when it comes to younger players. We've seen it in previous iterations of the team where there's been an overabundance of younger players that can take very little to knock confidence, and then confidence, motivation, that sort of thing comes with experience to be able to lift yourself up and be able to give that extra 5, 10, 20%. So,
Yeah, and look, and it's well observed and it's well known. I mean, the coach himself, I think, talked about bringing boxing gloves to training, right, to try and get them to fight a bit harder and get that sort of that desire to fight every duel and every moment in the game. So it's obviously a fair observation that Bridie's making.
now, a couple of questions slash comments from Twitter. So we sort of touched on it pretty previously, but Matt of this podcast has said, given our issues in front of goal, will management concede that letting Archie Goodwin sign for another A-League club was a mistake? Again, I think we're sort of with regard to that sort of in progress before you'd come along. We'd offered him a contract anyway, he turned it down, etc., etc. So, what do you obviously Newcastle boy, we want to try and keep them. He's doing well in Adelaide, but what was your assessment of the Archie Goodwin situation?
Yeah, well, the benefit of hindsight is also a wonderful thing too, right? So my assessment of Archie, and I did have coffee with Archie Goodwin. Sort of, I think it was the first week that we bought the club, and it was the first one of the first play. I think it was the first play meeting. I can't, and he's a lovely kid too, by the way. Just a ripping kid. I had a great time having a coffee with him, and I did my best to get him to stay. But I think, and I can't prove this, but I think that deal was done well before Maverick Sports Partners purchased the club, and he'd had a bit like Lucas Moragas, right? They had deals from other clubs, and you've got to understand, back then the Jets were a moment away of going under, as in not existing. Right, that's the reality. So, if you're a professional footballer and you think the club that you're contracted with is about to go under and be liquidated, and another club says, "Look, I can give you a 4-year job security," you're probably taking it, right? And I'm really thankful to all the staff and players and coaches that stuck fat in really, really tough circumstances. Like really, I've spoken to people that went to that Central Coast game thinking this is the last time they'll see the Jets. They've genuinely come up to me and said that's what we were thinking watching that game, right? So I think that probably had something to do with it. And Archie in particular, he probably needed that move. Archie this is just what I'm hearing and when I talk to people and sort of the community in Newcastle. Like, he was a very popular figure around town, was recognised everywhere, and probably moving out of that environment into more of a bubble where he's less recognisable, can really focus with less distraction for he's a young boy. He's got a great personality. He's got that sort of poster boy look about him as well. It was probably good for him to move away for a bit. What a lot of people don't talk about is that his fitness metrics are through the roof. So he's fitter than what he's ever been whilst he was at the Jets, and that's on every metric. And so he's worked hard to be in the condition that he's in now, and he's reaping the rewards. And I can tell you, everyone within the football department and our organisation are happy for Archie, absolutely. So yeah, to answer the question, mate, we'd love to have Archie Goodwin.
Yeah, we'd love to stay, but he was keen to try other opportunities. Right, another question from Twitter, GLB799. We sort of really answered this earlier. What drives decision making at the club in terms of player recruitment, retention, technical setup? Is there any data analysis in place through this process? If not, why not? We've sort of touched on that, but was there anything else you wanted to add to that we talked about before?
No, look, other than it's a combination of people, resources, networks, agents, but we now have signed up for specific software that helps with the data analysis. And I don't want to refer to it as sort of like a Moneyball thing, but it is something that helps decipher data and interpret data in a way that suits the Jets and the playing style and the profile of player that we're looking for to build a squad. We now have some technology that helps us with that. We're the only club in Australia that will be using that, and it is being used in Europe by a couple of clubs, one in the Premiership and one in the Championship at the moment. So we're trying to do everything we can to get, and maybe that edge is not the right word, but maybe just to increase our probability of success stories versus not success stories around recruitment.
Another level of filtering.
Yeah.
So same person also posted another comment after the takeover. Maurice said on one of the podcasts, Jets need the community to turn up to survive. Do you acknowledge that after a decade of rubbish, 10th, 8th, 10th, 2nd, 7th, 8th, 11th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, it's actually the club that needs to start turning up?
Yeah, it's a fair observation. I think it's a bit harsh.
Yes.
I think the club. Look, I can only speak for the last 8 months, right? I can't speak for the 10 years of history. But it's difficult to be successful on field when it's so tough off the field, right? I don't care what anyone says, the two are inextricably linked, and the club's been broke 4 times in 20 years. It's had 5 different owners, and the comment that I made is probably taken slightly out of context when I say it's up to the community to turn. It's really up, to turn up and engage, and we've seen that definitely in the business community. Our partnerships and connections in the business and corporate community has strengthened, and that's going to help. Our membership and our connection with the membership has strengthened. We're sort of approaching 2017, 18, 19 numbers in terms of members, off the back of COVID and some pretty tough years. So I think we are turning up. I can tell you, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of, players playing and fighting for the club that they didn't know was going to be around, next week or the week after, and coaches that have stuck fat through that process, and staff that have continued to do their best to bring the organisation to the community and put the best product we can on pitch. It has been tough. It's just, I think it's easy just to make a comment, and what does that mean? When's the club going to turn up? When are we going to sign 5 new players and pay them all $1 million each? That's years away, right? That ain't happening now. We will try and build on field and off field. Obviously, off field's the improvements happening faster than on field, but I think there's definitely green shoots there, and the process is there. The coaching football department is there. We just got to make the changes and build it, right? It's a tough question to answer.
Yeah. On the park takes a lot more time than off the park. It's unless you're, like you said, purchasing marquee players.
Unless everyone's a free agent and off contract, and I can tell you, if that was the case, they all would have left last year. Part of the reason why a lot stayed is because they had an extra year on the contract compared to some others.
Okay, Benny P 2323. sort of asked about any regrets with the purchase. I think you've pretty much answered that. But with crowd numbers as they are we looking to play any games out of number two?
Not for the boys. It's not eligible to play men's A League games, unfortunately, for a whole bunch of reasons. So we look at the moment. We're thinking we've had, I think, the five home games or six. We've had up to 8,500. Our lowest crowd has been 6 and a bit thousand. I think the atmosphere is okay. So not ideal. You'd rather 10 or 12, right? Of course. And I think with some better results, we might improve that. Our vision long term is to have, sort of more people coming to McDonald Jones, and even hopefully playing in 5 years' time, have the girls playing there too, because they also deserve to play at a stadium like McDonald Jones, and the way women's football is growing, that could be a possibility. And number two, it's a shared facility. I think the rugby's playing, the Wanderers are playing their first game there on the 6th of April, and we've still got a number of games still to play in the girls' space. It's having those shared sort of stadiums. We've had our troubles with number two. It's a problem. It's a great facility. I've been to all the girls' games there at number two, and it's a fantastic little stadium, but I don't think it can hold 8,500 people like we had one of the games.
Yeah, and there's been surface problems with a couple of different venues that the girls have been booked to play. So it's a bit of a a bit of a bugbear at the moment, but hopefully that will get fixed as time goes on. Now, the last topic, and obviously there's been a lot of conjecture about what's been going on with regards to the Jets' social media. And in particular the Facebook group and banning of certain individuals and all that sort of thing. There was a couple of comments posted when I put up this interview. So I'm just going to open it to you to answer how you'd like about what the expectations are, why some people were banned, and what recourse there is for people who think they've been unjustly dealt with.
Yeah, I was waiting for this one. Maybe we should have started.
I thought I'd leave it.
Started with this one first. Look, there's a couple of layers to unpack here as well, right? So one thing we've found in the last 8 months, there are a lot of coaches in Newcastle, a lot, and really good ones too. So and we'd like all of their opinions, right? So when it comes to social media, I think it's quite straightforward. We have, and all organisations have, social media policies and guidelines, and so have the Jets. And so on our official sites, we will be moderating those sites in accordance with those policies, right? And despite what people think and I've got to be careful what I say here, Furns, because obviously the Newcastle Herald wrote an article about that. There was a lot of allegations and alleged facts around, how long people were members and who were members and all of that. And so we're just, I can only say sort of allegedly before everything I say when we talk about that. So, but the reality is, hands up. I'll put my hand up here. That the Jets, those social media platforms of our official pages and sites weren't moderated appropriately for the period prior to Maverick Sports Partners, and we have begun moderating. I can say that people are not getting blocked for having an opinion, and you just need to spend some time going through our posts and you'll see plenty of opinion, and the bulk of it negative in terms of, we should be doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. The team should be playing better, should be showing more fight, should have more energy. Subs should be made different times, or, make more subs, less subs. Formation's wrong. This player, and this is where, if people need to get familiar with the policy. You can even say this player, surely we've got a better player than this, or this player is being played out of position, or had a really terrible game. But when you start to get offensive and you start to get aggressive and abusive and intimidating, and what we decided to do, or the moderators and our media department decided to do, was block some of those people. Now, some of those people were blocked 12 months ago, even before Maverick Sports Partners too, by the way. And so we're sort of in the process of continuing to moderate. But all I'm going to say is you're only going to get blocked if you're not in accordance with the policy. The fallout of that has been interesting, to say the least, and it's probably, and I don't want to start a war of, like let's try and get more people to email the club because we're not happy. But the facts of the circumstances are, for the benefit of your listeners, we've received 2 emails from members requesting to cancel membership. So 2. Which we did. We prepared to and got all the details to do that. 1 then changed their mind and said, no, I want to stay a member. So we have refunded 1 person's membership. It was a 3-game membership, so $65 was refunded. The second person that then changed their mind was just a general member of the club, had a Victorian address. So I think that was either $30 or $60, but they changed their mind. So 1 member. We had 6 members, I think it's either 5 or 6, I can get the exact number, but 5 or 6 members did email requesting to be unblocked. I'm pretty sure our team has since responded, unblocked, and sent them the social media policy, the Jets one, so they can refresh on what's okay and what's not okay. So that's the extent of it. We're also at the moment just getting on the front foot and going through all our blocked, all the people that have been blocked. I think we're going back to about 2020 at the moment, and cross-referencing to our member database. And so we will reach out to them to sort of say, hey, we've noticed that you are a member, or have been a member, and we don't want to sort of burn those bridges. Probably I suspect that, depending, every case is different, and I don't want to, like I said, justify anyone by repeating the comments that were made that caused the blocks, but no one's been blocked for liking a comment, as was allegedly reported in the Newcastle Herald article as well. So that's the extent of it. I might just add, I've received numerous more text messages and emails congratulating the club on taking the stance that they have. Apparently many of our members and supporters have said this is a long time overdue. This is why, I've told you before, I'm a big fan of Jetstream podcast. You guys are very critical and very opinionated about team performance, players, coaching performances. It's based on there's a process behind reaching your opinions and the team's opinions. And I appreciate we all have a different opinion. And I really respect and everyone should, right? And that's why we have fan-based podcasts and fan-based pages where people can go hell for leather on those pages and say whatever they want, whether you like it or not. And if the moderators of those sites choose to leave those comments, that's up to them to do. But we want to make certainly our pages a safe space for people to engage and form opinions, and for players and players' families and coaches families to peruse and try and get an understanding of some of those opinions themselves. If that's what they choose to do, I personally wouldn't, but if that's what they choose to do, why not? And just want to make sure it's a safe space for them to do that.
So we did discuss it on the last episode, which I believe you listened to, Maurice, and we were sort of the opinion that yes, it's gone from an unregulated Wild West to being a little bit more control, not necessarily control, but more regulated. There's guidelines that have to be adhered to, which is fine because people don't necessarily realize that people who moderate or admin a specific Facebook group can be held liable in a court due to defamatory language.
Correct.
Libel and slander. You can fall afoul of those just by being listed on an admin page on a Facebook group. So that it's gone from the Wild West to something that's got some guidelines, which obviously some people think that social media should be open slather. I don't, because obviously there needs to be guidelines and manners and all that sort of thing, notwithstanding, abusive, racist, homophobic, all that sort of stuff is a no-go and would get you banned on a Jetstream page, let alone the Jets page. So
and threatening.
But we sort of seem to think that maybe the response when starting that process could have been handled a little bit differently. Do you think that maybe that going from nothing to this is maybe a period of introduction for a couple of weeks? This is what we're looking to do from now on. This is what the guidelines and stuff are going to be. Might have been a slightly better way of implementing said media policy.
Yeah. Well, look, we could have applied a different approach to how we moderate, and it's only the Jets official sites that we're talking about here, right? So yeah, look, we could have applied a slightly different approach. I think maybe the pendulum went a bit too far the other way, but like I said, we've since unblocked a bunch of people, not just the 6 members I referred to before, but I've had some people message me directly and say, can I be unblocked? And we've had a conversation talking about, exactly that. And we want to encourage people to engage and have opinions, of course, but we just want to make it a safe space. Yeah, we could have applied a different approach, but I think the pendulum sort of might have swung. It was too much one way, swung back the other way a bit too much, and it's now sort of oscillating in the middle where I think things are a little bit better moderated. So I think it's a bit of cause and effect too, right? So, and you talk about sort of legalities of it, and then that's pretty complex as well. So Facebook and Meta have, for those that don't know, do have an automatic moderating tool within the software. So if you use a C word or an F word, that automatically gets deleted by Facebook and Meta, right? It doesn't, and I think it may also block the person, or whether it's a bot or whatever it is, as well. So some of that happens automatically. It's not even the actual admin or moderator that does that. And yeah, look, there are, there's circumstances where, you don't even want to imagine, if there was a player, coach or a staff member or someone that, did read a lot of, incredibly negative and threatening comments and, resulted in something happening. You just don't want to get there, right? And again, there's trademark, there's copyright. There's a lot of those unofficial fan sites that just, download things that the Jets put up and put it on their site without, and they're probably breaching all sorts of copyright and trademarking, right? And could probably, if the Jets organisation, wanted to, could probably shut them down. Tomorrow, but we'd never do that, right? Because we want fans to engage, and we want fans to have forums that aren't moderated by the club, and that's what being a fan's about, right? That's what listening. And I reckon I'm the first person each time you issue your podcast to listen to it. But that's what fan podcasts are all about, right? So that's because ultimately, I'm a fan too, first and foremost. I put the officialdom to one side. I'm a fan first and foremost, right? I want the Jets to win more than anyone.
So, for clarification, anybody who thinks that they've been unjustly banned or blocked from the Jets social media, how can they get in contact to get that decision reviewed?
Well, I would send an email to the club and say, exactly that. And then it's happened. We've had plenty of them. And then our team will look into it and then see, what was said, and then maybe, like what's happened 99% of the time is the individuals have been unblocked and just resent the guidelines and just sort of warn, just make sure, you're careful with what you post.
Is there a specific email address?
But just don't be offensive or threatening.
Is there a specific email address or just contact at Newcastle Jets?
I think it's admin at newcastlejetsfc.com.au.
Right. Okay. So just for clarification's sake, that's what you can do if you think you've been interested. There was a couple of people that did post onto the Facebook post that I put up on our page that made reference to one or two things. So if those people would like to get in contact with the club, I think the lady who asked one of the previous questions, Bridie, I think, is one of those people that was highlighted. So Bridie, okay. If you have been blocked and you want to get that decision reviewed, obviously admin at Newcastle Jets FC.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe offline, Fern, if you can give me the details that you've got there, and then I'll get my guys to reach out directly.
Yep, no problem at all. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything. We've spent a fair bit of time, so no questions been off limits. We haven't been asked to censor anything. Maurice has been quite upfront with everything, and we really appreciate your honesty and candor with regards to all the questions that have been put to you, and timely information and updates and all that sort of thing. Like you've got a lot more context around what's going on at the club and what's happening. Stopping my bloody sleeve from disappearing on the video again. Really appreciate you coming on and giving information to the level that you have. We hope that we can continue the open relationship that we've got, and feel free to come back on at any time. We really appreciate you making yourself available.
Yeah. Well, just reach out, mate. I'm happy to come on anytime. Like I said, I'm a supporter of the podcast. I'm an avid listener of the podcast.
Thank you.
And hopefully that doesn't shift the things you say and how you say them. So,
well, no, our opinions might not be right, but our opinions always come from a place of constructive criticism.
Well, opinions are opinions, right? Like it's something I've heard Rob talk about, as in Stanton, our coach. Like it's okay. It's football, right? It's opinions. Everyone's opinion is valid. They're valid opinions. It's just some people a little bit more committed. Like his opinions, I'm not saying they're more important, but they certainly have a bit more commitment behind them because, it's his responsibility to execute on those opinions. So it's easy to have an opinion without the commitment, so to speak. But and it's our game. It's the beauty of our game. If there was no room for opinions, I reckon it'd be a boring sport. But
yeah, absolutely. Especially with the fan media that sprung up around football across the planet, not just in the A-League. So yes, thank you. Really appreciate.
I imagine being Ange right now, right?
Oh yeah, poor bugger, and it's mostly not his fault. So, but we're not a Tottenham podcast, so we'll leave that. Maurice, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks very much.
No worries, friends.
Time, and we will speak to you again soon.
Okay, mate. Thanks a lot.